was born and raised in Victoria, Texas, a town of about 35,000 people. It's a great town to grow up in. You know, did all the normal things. You know, back in those days, kids ran the neighborhood. Nobody, we didn't have to wear helmets with our bicycles and all that. During when I was in high school, we moved to Houston and finished high school and graduated from Westchester High School. I was a Westchester Wildcat.
Here in Houston?
Yeah. The most frustrating thing to me about that was the school colors were orange and white. That always bothered me for the whole time I was at Westchester High School. When I was ready to go to college, I knew I wanted to major in engineering. Most people don't know that I was a National Merit Scholar and chose Texas A&M University because I knew they had a great engineering program, and went there and never regretted it. Started out in mechanical engineering, which is kind of an interesting story. Many people know my father is also a civil engineer, so I heard about engineering my whole life around the dinner table. He would occasionally take me out on job visits and things, which I always thought was interesting, but so I was going to be a little different and be a mechanical engineer. Spent a year in mechanical, didn't like anything about the professors or any of that, so I was going to stay in engineering. Had met some civil profs, liked them, so I switched over to civil. Turned out to be a fairly good choice, and went ahead and got my bachelor's degree at Texas A&M. Took a job in Houston right out of college with Turner, Hawley and Braden. Started with TCMB, had done some work with them as a student. During summer times I had worked with them. Had a good 5 years with them. They reorganized their company. Moved to Fort Worth for 3 years. Worked for Rady and Associates. Joe Rady was still alive and part of the company. Really good experience because it was a small company, and I was able to do a whole lot of things in a hurry. Learned a lot from Bob King and Darrell Johnson, both who had been very active in ASCE through the years. After 3 years, just work and family called me back to Houston. I was fortunate to get a job with Dannenbaum Engineering. I was the department manager for all of their hydraulics and hydrology, and during the time I was there, I actually began handling all of the hydraulics and hydrology for the whole company. And then in 1985, had an opportunity, thinking that we were getting ready to turn the corner in the Texas economy, but we had an opportunity to purchase an old line engineering company that had been in business since 1937. And so we did until in 1985, Klotz Associates was born. I became president of the company in 1987. We had a whopping 12 people at that time. And then since 1987, I've been blessed with having some of the greatest people I've ever met come to work here to share the load, and we've grown the company to 125 and 4 offices, and we still have high hopes and high aspirations, so people better watch out for us.
Now, when did your involvement with the ASCE or the American Society of Civil Engineers start? Was that when you were a student at A&M?
I joined the McNew student chapter at Texas A&M at the end of my sophomore year, so that would have been 1972. So I've been in the deal for a while. Became treasurer of ASCE before I graduated, and when I graduated, then immediately started attending meetings of the Houston branch. Back then it was the place to be. I mean, we met at the old Houston Engineers Club, and you had to have a coat and tie. And, if you showed up without a tie, they always had some raggedy old tie they'd hang around your neck. I mean, it made you wear it, and really enjoyed that. Got started participating in committees at the branch level. Wrote a paper for the mead contest. Won that contest that year. The Texas section actually was very good to me. I had the Hawley Fellowship the whole time I was in graduate school, which was very helpful. And again, as circles closed later in my tenure, I was the president of the Texas section who actually changed the appointment process on both the Hawley and Porter Fellowships. We had people who'd been serving for years and didn't want to. And so we fixed a deal based on the number there is that every president gets to appoint one trustee. And so you always have people who want to be there. But I had the privilege of being a Hawley trustee after all those years, and so again, those kinds of circles close, and I really enjoyed the Hawley time because it's an opportunity to give financial help to people who really need it. It wasn't my idea, but I was the treasurer of the trust when we decided to change the way the funds were invested. They were fully invested in growth stocks. We changed out of the growth stocks into a more balanced investment right before the bubble burst.
That's good.
And because of that, we saved of all that money, and we're getting good returns. And while other people were going around going, "Oh my gosh, we lost all our money," we were increasing the amount of scholarship money we were giving to our winners. So I always thought that was kind of cool.
No, that's great.
Even though we were fighting financial problems when I was president, and in fact, I think we were the first Texas section annual report that was submitted on time, like the day. I had called ahead. I told them what our fiscal situation was. But we literally, Janice would call and she'd say, "Wayne, I've got $2,000. And I'd say, "Well, what's in the drawer?" "Well, we owe $10,000 to our vendors." And I'd say, "Okay, which vendors can we not live without?" I mean, if, as much as you hate it, if your office supply store cuts you off, there's other places to buy office supplies. But there are certain things, I mean, you can't not pay insurance and those sorts of things.
Or you got to pay the phone bill.
Or the phone bill. And I'd say, "Okay, what's in there?" And she'd say, "Well, I got a phone bill." So pay the phone bill. We literally did that. But we got the branches to do it. We had national lined up. We sent the annual report to New York, because it was still New York in those days, so that it arrived, FedEx, so that it arrived there the first day that you could send in your reports. And you had to send in your annual report to get your allotment. And they knew it was coming, and they wrote the allotment check and overnighted it back to us. And that was what finally broke the crisis. We had enough money to operate till January, February, when the dues started flowing again. And so not only did we not raise dues, we ended the year with a $2,000 or $3,000 surplus, which I still think was one of the most amazing things that nobody in ASCE knows other than Janice and me. But we didn't just fight that. During that year, we reorganized all of the committees. The whole committee structure of the Texas section was reorganized. We did a complete rewrite of the rules of operation because several of the things were completely out of date. So we completely rewrote the rules of operation. I mean, we dedicated historical landmarks. We had a great year, even while we were fighting off the financial monsters. And anyway, I just want to make sure people know, don't just think poor old Wayne, he was the guy that fought the money. No, we got a lot done. I'm amazed at the work that the members did, even that, and we didn't have a special assessment. Now, bless his heart, Bob Patton had to have a special assessment. Did he tell you that?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as the national stuff, after I went through the chairs of the Texas section, wanted to remain active in ASCE, and made myself available to the Texas section, and have served on committees off and on for the 17 years, I guess, since I've been president. But I was given the opportunity to serve on a national committee. I, again, chose a, quote, professional path. I was appointed to the Committee on Employment Conditions. That's what it was called in those days. It was COEC. And met some really fine people, some of whom are still leaders in ASCE. Was on that committee for 4 years, had the privilege of chairing it my last year, and I kind of got a flavor of what national did. And it really is a very different focus. Bill Henry, who ultimately became president of ASCE, called and asked me to chair the State Government Relations Committee, which had been dormant, but he was very interested in getting it going. So we jump-started a dead committee and actually did some really good things with it. It became a very vibrant group. We started providing resources out to the sections and branches who were trying to deal with state, which is called state government relations, but state legislatures, but we also were encouraging people to deal with city councils and things like that. That committee Now, it wasn't just jump-started. It is a thriving committee. It's a subcommittee of the Committee on Governmental Affairs, CGA. So through that committee, then I was able to move up onto CGA. The years pass. You're working. One day you get a call from the Texas section. They say, we've got an opening coming up on the board. This is what it used to be. We'd like you to consider it. And I thought about it. Bob Patton had been on the board. He's a longtime friend and advisor to me. And I called Bob, talked to him at length. Actually took Bob's spot. He went off, I came on. So I told all of them, I said, well, the nice guy left and now you get me. But I went on the board, had a chance to see how it worked with some really large issues that we dealt with on the board. I was on the board when we voted on the policy to raise the bar, not to require a master's degree, but to allow variety in education. I was on the board when we voted to change governance. And one of those circles that closes again, I will be the first president to preside over the downsized board at its permanent size. It's been every year one or two go off, and so next year when I serve, it'll be the first time that it's what it's going to be until we change it again. And I hope as a society that's what we think until we change it again. If the needs of the society change, we should change. I mean, not willy-nilly. But that while I was on the board, I had the chance to chair the Policy Review Committee, which kept me very involved in ASCE's policy and advocacy, because we don't advocate a position if we don't have policy. We streamlined the approval process. We took a meeting that used to last 8 hours. There's currently 5 committees that oversee the development of policy from all over the society. Those committees do their thing. The policy review is the group that says yes or no, we'll send this to the board, or we're going to send it back. It's made up of board members. We took a process that had taken 8 hours. We did it in 2. There's 150 something policies that ASCE has. At the time that this was being done, about 30% of them were actually up to date. They all have time limits on them. People just weren't watching. By the time our committee finished, every policy in ASCE was up to date. I mean, it just shows that even in an organization like that, if you decide to, you can get it done. Tony Reed called me a year or 2 later. Tony had gone on to the board representing District 15 and said, we want to create Region 6. I would like you to be one of the members of the formation team. And so, having voted governance, I said, I probably ought to be willing to roll up my sleeves since I was part of this process. So I agreed to go on the region formation team. There were 6 of us. We formed it, determined the structure of the governance, so that once we formed it, then we all became the initial governors. So I was one of the initial governors of Region 6. Amazingly, even though we were all appointed, I was in the at-large spot, which was the, quote, appointed slot. Served, I think, for 3 or 4 years as various people came on and off. Our 3 sections, Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. And I feel pretty good about at least getting something started. And I know, Jack, you're trying to help that. There's potential there. It's just hard to get your arms around what that is. But I'm old enough to know that sometimes windows and doors open that are only open for a little while, and then that door or window never opens to you again. And I really looked at it, and I believed that based on my experience, the people that I knew who were still involved in the leadership of the organization, and the fact of where the election cycles were going, I really believed that I could be elected president of ASCE. I'm a person who won't do things unless I think I can make a difference. I'm not a caretaker. That shouldn't surprise you. And so I sat down with my key staff, my vice presidents and operating officers and people in the company. I said, look, there may be a chance for me to be president of ASCE. Not very many people have had that chance in their life. But the company's more important to me, and I would like your opinion, because it will take time. Not full time. I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm going to try to set an example for those who come behind, that you can be active member of the profession and serve in leadership, that you don't have to have retired to be president of ASCE. And fortunately for me, none of the candidate names that were kind of milling around under the surface surfaced. And so I may be the last one that ever ran unopposed, which made for a very inexpensive and stress-free campaign. But I chose the ABCs because that's something that not just I remember, but everybody remembers. And it's been gratifying to me as I've traveled around the country. In ASCE, the president-elect, unbeknownst to most people, is the person who travels the most. It's my job to accept the invitations to sections, region meetings, student chapters, infrastructure conferences, steel bridge contest finals, canoe contest finals, which in fact is a week from now in Montreal, Canada. I'm still trying to figure out how that's a good deal, but the kids are excited about it, so we're all going off Montreal next week. So I spend a lot of time doing that, and where I go, people say, "Oh, you're the ABC guy." That's not a bad thing, because they know what I'm about, which is for a year, it'll be a priority for the society. Now, admittedly, ASCE is like turning an aircraft carrier. It is a huge organization. Momentum for all the engineers is large, and it is moving forward. I'm very proud that ASCE is the only one of the founder societies that's still growing. We're up to 144,000. So I want to raise the awareness that all engineers, whether it's in Congress or in your state legislature, wherever you are, we need to go and tell people the value of what putting $1 in a water line or a roadway or a drainage ditch is. Advocacy is a big deal, and one of the things that we're doing, in addition to making sure that we increase the funding for our national lobby efforts, yes, we do lobby. Lobby's not a bad word. We're going to be creating some resources that will be internet-based, so that any member, any branch, any section, any institute chapter that says, I don't know how to go talk to a legislator, there's going to be material that you can go grab off the ASCE website and look at it by yourself. You can have a branch meeting or a meeting and let people see that, and some training resources. B is benefit. ASCE has some very long-range, overreaching, profession-changing initiatives. Raising the bar, which has to do with education and licensure. We have the engineer in 2025. What is an engineer going to need to look like, however many years that is from now, 17 years from now? Those are great things. I mean, somebody needs to be doing that. I think, though, we should never forget that we have members that pay dues every year that need things from ASCE. So I'm going to talk to every committee at the national level, and everything we do at the board level is going to be run through the filter of how does this benefit the member. The C is change. It's not change in terms of change for change's sake. It's change, it's recognizing that people are changing, generations change, and so what we've got is, we've got a whole generation of people who've come into the profession in the last 8 or 10 years that don't think like baby boomers. Boomers right now are the ones that have most of the leadership position. They don't think like boomers. They're not going to ever think like boomers. Their aspirations aren't like boomers. They communicate differently. They multitask. Everything they have is electronic. Everything is in their iPhone, BlackBerry, whatever it is that they've got in their purse or on their hip. And we need to change what we're doing to give them an attractive entree to ASCE, to show them that we appreciate the fact that they view life differently, and we're going to provide opportunities for them to be successful in ASCE as they move along. In 15 years from now, they're going to be the ones that you come and interview. Tell me anybody, retail, pick it, that has more impact on people, I mean tens of thousands of people, for decades than civil engineering. I don't know what it is. So why do I like being a civil engineer? Because deep down, I want what I do with my life to matter. And I think being a civil engineer matters, and that's why I'm willing to do what I do.